the place or the vocation that you are being worked at that place. If you have a different eyes or different heart to see things, I think that compassion will come out. I think definitely in Hong Kong quite a lot of stress and a lot of stressful places. Then how can you keep your focus that the work that you're doing is not just for that sake of doing it. Whatever you do, that you can see things differently. And at the same time, after I talk about study, spirituality, and also I talk about the transformation journey, for me, I just left my 27 years job, finding what is my talent, real talent, what is my passion, and what is the context. Most probably, of course, I read the book, Halftime book, From Success to Significance, but I really think that it's not from doing to another doing. It is in the process of doing to being. So when you are right now doing your role, maybe you think that your specialties is already your talent, but sometimes maybe other talents. That's why I need a little bit of discernment, or there are certain talents that you may find in small group in different way that and there are people I've experienced, not necessarily like moving to another career, but maybe when you are right now in your job, you can parallel to experience what other else of your talent and passion in it. So this is also a bit of the halftime journey. So at last but not least, I like to a little bit of not tips, but then also Henry Nouwen, always my favorite author, talking about heart. Why I mentioned journey of the heart. I think everything is in the heart, not in your brain. Henry Nouwen said, our heart is at the center of our being human. What is the most intimate is also what frightens us most. Where we are most ourselves, we are often strangers to ourselves. The mystery of spiritual life is that Jesus desires to meet us in that seclusion of your own heart. Each time, each meditation, when letting the love of God penetrate deeper into my heart, I lost a bit of my anxiety. And every time I shared a bit of my anxiety, I learned to know myself better and long to be known by my loving God. So the more I learn to love God, the more I learn to know and cherish myself. So you can see, I think this is why the journey of heart and knowing God and knowing myself, my true self-knowledge is so important. And then when you love yourself, and you love God, and you will also love other people. Whatever your beloved colleagues or not very beloved colleagues, I have experienced all, maybe, he or she, comes again, and then how can I resist? But then, I think it's only, the world may not be changed, only when your heart changed. So this self-knowledge and self-love, I think, is the fruit of knowing and loving God. So that's why in a commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and you love your neighbors. So in the seclusion of heart, I hope you can find some hidden presence. I got the blessings. I worked in Cheung Kong Center for many years. So every morning or sometimes lunchtime, I squeezed into St. John's Cathedral. Sometimes, of course, coming to Union Church, but then St. John's Cathedral very nearby. Just sit there, be still, or just read a verse, or listen to some music. Is already a communion with God. One of my practical theology sisters told me, in a concert, beautiful music, that she experienced God too. So it's a very interesting, important action. So transformation, I hope you can be transformed in your workplace, in your role, and it is a pilgrimage. It's not just click right now. I took 20-something years to continue. It's still a journey. So I think through daily meditation or your daily prayer, this transformation also is mindfulness and awakening. But some tips that I really have been doing, maybe you can share a bit, is study. Study whether journal, take your journal, and then reflect. community of faith. I think you have this faithful friends to be together, and also spiritual guidance and mentor, like what Perry just mentioned. And then I hope that you can find your external life to interior life too. Thank you. So Charles?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Okay, so you're all born post-1980 apparently. The greatest thing you are ever going to do is yet to happen. I promise you that. The greatest thing you are ever going to do in your life has yet to happen. Isn't that something to look forward to? That's an amazing thing to look forward to. So just let that sink in. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about my experience of faith in the workplace and build a little bit on what Perry and Christine have talked about. I'll start. How many of you have a desire to share your faith more in your workplace or in your communities that you're in, whether it's workplace, communities, school? You have a desire to share more. Okay. So one of the ways I would look at that is you'll have a Christian brand. So you will be known as a certain way. You will have a certain brand as a certain type of spiritual individual. And one of the things that Christine said is that we're all priests. Sorry, Matthew. But we're all priests. So actually we're all part of the body of Christ. And if you look back over the last thousands of years and all the literature the last thousands of years, which Matthew would have done, you'll discover that there were lots and lots of situations where people who were not necessarily officially ordained were out there and they were acting as priests. They were lay leaders, basically. They were acting as lay leaders. So we really are all the priesthood of all believers. And we will have a particular brand. Now, some of you may know my little triplets, who are actually not that little. They're 10 years old now. But when they were born 3.5. Yeah, I'm in human resources. I have headcount issues everywhere. But when they were born 3.5 months premature. It was a horrible situation. They nearly died. It's a long story. At the time, I was in a regional HR role, and I went to India. And in India, I was working for Juniper Networks, which was a major competitor of Cisco. You may not know Juniper, but you probably know Cisco. And we were building out a large R&D center in Bangalore. And they were very, very skeptical of the Canadian. And from head office in Hong Kong. Very skeptical. And then I was working there for about a year. And then traveling back and forth, going in once every 6 weeks. And then the triplets were born. And one of the guys, unbeknownst to me, he was Hindi. And the night after the triplets were born, he sent me a message and he said, I went today. No, he was Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, one of the oldest churches actually in India. And he and another individual, a Hindi, went to a church and prayed for the triplets in a church. And I was, that journey, life will send you trials. One of the things to remember is life will send you trials, but God will never give you anything more than you can deal with. And when that trial of the triplets came along, and I found out that they had gone to the Infant Jesus Shrine in Bangalore, which I found out later is notorious for miracles, I said to them, I want to go there. So the next time I went to Bangalore, about 3 or 4 weeks later, my friend Tojo and Charles Fernandez, who was the Hindi, we went to that shrine and we prayed for the triplets. The next day, I went into the office and I could not believe the difference in how I was received. The individuals, when they found out that I was spiritual, it washed away so much skepticism on their part. And even though they were in a different particular faith, I started to understand the impact of having a spiritual brand in the workplace, and then having that's now manifested itself as a Christian brand in the workplace for me now. So that was, and now 10 years later, the triplets are fantastic, and you see them running around on Sunday causing havoc. So that's the story of India. And the reason I share that story is because of the impact of sharing yourself in the workplace. And there's many, many ways that you can do that. And one of the ways that I do that is through social media. So recently in January, in December, we had this huge leadership conference at ESF. Any ESF grads here? Fantastic. Which school? Excellent. Fantastic. Great school. And so we had this big leadership conference in December, and we all were driving ESF forward into social media. So we were all going on Twitter, and everyone's joining up on Twitter. We had leadership hashtags and people sharing all these wonderful insights about these leadership speakers that came in to talk about education. And then about a month later, Ryan and I headed off to the Jesus Culture Conference in Redding, California. And over the next 72 hours, I pretty aggressively tweeted about all the different types of insights and took pictures of the conference onto Twitter. And meanwhile, all my friends and all my colleagues at ESF were watching this. And I knew that this was happening. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to let that go and drive that forward, because that's part of my Christian brand. That's part of my spiritual brand. And when I got back, I could feel the impact, both in a positive way and, sometimes not so positive way, because when we share our faith, it sometimes goes well and sometimes doesn't go well. But for most of the time, I felt a little bit more respect from individuals that I had put myself out there so much through social media and shared different aspects of the conference. So social media is really quite remarkable, and I think maybe on another night I can come and talk about social media and the impact on social media, because when you take social media and you merge it with Christianity, it's really remarkable the sorts of things that are happening. So the other thing I will share with you is prayer. So one of the ways I don't really build my Christian brand through this, but one of the questions I have down here is, what are you afraid of doing? If the greatest thing you're ever going to do has yet to happen, what are you afraid of doing? And what would happen if God took away all your fear so that you didn't have any whatsoever? But one of the things I try to do, and sometimes I do it well and sometimes I don't do it well, is I pray in the workplace. So one of the questions you can ask yourself is, how much time are you spending praying in the workplace? And how much time are you spending praying for your boss? Or for praying for your boss's family? Or how much time are you spending praying for your enemies or the people who you think are out to stab you in your back? Because don't forget, Jesus died for them too. Which is not easy. When I drive to work in the morning and a taxi cuts me off, it's very hard for me to remember that Jesus died for that taxi driver too. But I have to try to trust myself to pray for people in the workplace. So my job as human resources professionals will tell you, can often be difficult. The history of HR, sometimes we're looked at as policemen and enforcing policies. Depending on the type of organization you're in, you might be doing lots of high growth, wonderful leadership stuff, or you might be involved in grievances and disciplinary issues. But one of the things, so that can be tough. But one of the things I try to do is I really try to pray for people. And this year in my role, I have tried to get together people to pray more often in our office and to pray for the organization. And I had this experience a couple of years ago when I was about 18 months into my role at ESF, and I was in the middle of a really nasty situation where an individual in the organization came to me and she said, I have to go back to Canada because my mom is dying of advanced liver cancer, and she has about 3 months to go. So we kind of talked through that. And I didn't really know much about this person's faith, but I knew that she took her son to Island ECC, but I was told by other people in the office that she was not a believer. And finally, on one of her last weeks in the office, she came in, and I just felt this tug. Christine was talking about, that tug inside, and she came into my office. It was one of her last days in the office. I said, "Would you like me to pray for you?" She said, "Yes." So I closed the door, and I sat her down, and I closed the blinds so that we'd have some privacy, and I sat there and I prayed for her. And she wept and cried and cried. And then we finished up, and I walked her to the elevator, and she was gone, and she had about another week in the office. And after I was walking back from the elevator, I had this experience of kind of liquid love. You ever had that? Kind of liquid love pouring over you? Impossible to explain. Some would say supernatural. But I had this experience of liquid love pouring over me. And I'm not the kind of person who says that God talks to me, but I felt I was nudged. And if God was talking to me that day, He would have been saying to me, "This is why you're here, to pray for people." And that was an amazing experience for me. So whenever I can, I try to find people to pray for in work. And it doesn't always work fantastic, but you really have to trust your instincts. And it makes a huge difference, brings a great peace, and helps you to move forward your Christian life. So on that note, I'll hand it back over. I don't know if we have time for maybe questions, or do you want to break up into groups? Okay, sure.
Thank you, Charles. So why don't we have the last 10 minutes just to open the floor up, and any questions you may have, please share those with us. Remember, the tough questions on that side, okay? But just start out with some questions on maybe some of the things we've said, maybe some of the things we haven't said, but we'd be glad to share some views and thoughts with everyone. So who has the first question, Matthew?
This question belongs to... David.
Hello. How does your faith help you in the workplace with all the challenges and stress that you have?
How has our faith helped us in a workplace with all the challenges and stress that we have?
That's right.
Well, one thing for sure is trusting in God that He'll answer your prayers. And, I write emails. I try to be an available individual. And the downside to that at work is I tend to attract people who will be upset about stuff. And so you'll get nasty emails and resolving problems. And I will write a response to an individual. If I need to, I'll do the 24-hour rule, to take all the emotion out of it, then go back and rewrite it again to calm down the email if it's emotionally charged. But I will often pray before I send emails, and then as I push the send button, I have said this thousands and thousands of times, I will just say, "Lord, I trust you, and I'm just going to send this email, and I'm going to leave it in your hands." And then I push send, and I don't worry about it. It's like Mother Teresa. This baby is in my arms right now, and everything else is in God's hands. And the moment I press that email, it's in God's hands, and bring it on. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but yeah, okay.
Praying definitely is very important. I have come across a situation I was very, very angry, which is very unusual. I was very mellow usually. Yeah, I was very mellow, but then in the Dutch bank, and then it's like a very without any conversation with my boss at that time, and then I was praying, and then I think that transformational moment was that when I calmed down by grace of God, that I I can see not myself, not I, but him as well as others. I need to continue that relationship, but I need to break the ice. But how can I do that until I can put down all the pride and ego and everything? So after my praying, I think, of course, the whole situation changed, and I took the initiative and explained very assertively why I was so angry. And then he also explained blah, blah, blah. And then I think the relationship changed. But also one thing Mother Teresa said, God doesn't need us to do big things, but do small things in great faith. So whenever, I think every day you meet every people, are you really that brand? Are you a joyful person or loving person? No matter how much I study, I remember. Then I always keep reminded. If whatever I study, whatever my whatever work, if we are not every day more loving, more Christ-like, that is not the way I think God loves us. So it's really daily life.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, from tonight we've heard a lot about change and transformation, and we've seen that you've all had very successful careers. So I just wanted to ask, from the wealth of the 20 years plus experience that you've had, through each step that you've made, if you could just share some color as to how you've experienced God's calling, or how you have made the next step based on what you've experienced through prayer or what you hear from God.
Thank you for that question. I want to add something in there, because you mentioned the word failure. So one of the things that's very, very important to sort out in your life as early as possible is to get a powerful relationship with failure. You must have a powerful relationship with failure. You need to be able to talk about your failures, and you need to be able to embrace them and learn from them and build on them. You know, Perry talked about mentoring tonight, and one of the questions I have for you, if we had more time, one of the questions I have for you is, what kind of leadership are the mentors providing? They're providing servant leadership. And my next question would be is, who are you going to mentor? Because you're all leaders. But when it comes to failure, you need to have a powerful relationship with failure. So not all of my career has been successful. The business that Matthew talked about earlier went through times when it was nearly bankrupt. And around about that same season, I failed my second year university and was thrown out of university. And that was very, very, very difficult. And my mother said to me, "You're never going back to school. I don't want you to take a gap year." And I now look back on that and I think that she tricked me. But to go back in that gap year, because at the end of that gap year, I was invited to try out for the Canadian America's Cup sailing team. And I thought to myself, ooh, if I try out for the America's Cup sailing team, I'm not going to go back to school at the end of that first year. And so I was true to my word to my mom, and I went back to school, and 3 years later I graduated on the Dean's Honors List. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea that my whole career has been wonderfully successful. It has its ups and downs. What I have tried to build, the muscle that I've tried to build, which is a bit of a calling from God maybe, is that when you're on a high, any doctor will tell you a flat line is bad. But when you're at the top of the trough, chances are you're heading down to the bottom of the trough. And when you're at the bottom of the trough, you can look forward to going back up to the top of the trough. That's a little bit the answer to your question about how does your faith pull you through. Well, if you have faith that God's going to take you up and down in life, you know when you're down, you're going to go up. When you feel that God's not there, that just proves to you that He exists, because there are times when you feel He is there. I'm sure of it.
From my experience, I think it's a very natural step, making certain decisions when we are close to God. I think it's so-called discernment. In many cases, so-called key decision making or key steps or key critical turning points, it needs that for a little bit like confirmation, but not one time, but many times. So it needs waiting, it needs perseverance, it needs to really open the heart, because in many cases we think, right, this is the jump to that decision. I have been, changing jobs many times because of the very great investment banking age. 2 years, then headhunters will call you. I jumped. At that time, I never in my life or equation or decision-making process. Then, of course, I was successful. But until going through a lot of... that success is not satisfying me or make me fulfilled. But until certain stage and of course certain encountering with him through many circumstances. Particularly one example, like 5 years ago, after reading this success or halftime book, then started to think about my relationship with him. Of course, going through a number of transformational retreat or process. Then using the banking experience to an education company, that is also key decision making. But that was very natural that I really have the very serving heart, because I think there's also passion in education. But then the whole banking experiences transferred to another. I thought it was my first time half-time journey, but it was still ongoing. Now it's the second half-time journey. When I left my last 5 years and of course 27 years career, everyone thought, if in a secular world mindset, you're crazy. Of course you may be financially well off, you don't need that high salary. It's nothing about that. But he has been, I think God has been molding me to let go this, let go that, and then like cleansing, like purification process. But it is a process to stay close and not. Some people may be certain, different way to discern. But then while the most peaceful way, I don't still don't know. Whatever, right? I do, no title, nothing. But then that is a certain very natural, godly way. But when staying close, like a vine, right? And the branches, when you stay close, and like what I mentioned, discipline, learning, praying, that will know his message.
Let me just compliment what both Charles and Christina shared. When I was in the corporate world, our chairman used to share with us the following. As you have disappointment, or actually if you actually make a mistake, he had 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, when you make the mistake, own it. And what did he mean by that? Let everyone know what the mistake was. So communicate that and market it. And why? So people can learn from it. The next point he would make, of course, is learn from that mistake. So you're entitled to one mistake, but don't make it again. And the third area was this resilience. Let go. Have faith in the mistakes that you've made to build for a better tomorrow and grow with that. So it's putting it out there, both in terms of your faith as well as your resilience and your growth as you move forward in your career. So, with that now, it is 9 o'clock. Can I suggest the following? Firstly, thank you for your time. Thanks, Charles, Christine, and Matthew for organizing this. Since it is 9 o'clock, can I suggest that maybe we adjourn? But if you had specific questions for either of the 3 of us, please come up and we'll spend a couple of minutes here and talk to you directly. Thank you.
Also, so next week we're having a Seder meal in here, Passover meal. Also on the 10th, so that's a Wednesday next week, on the 10th, a Thursday, if you came in late, we're going to see Caravaggio. an exhibit of this famous Italian painter, his most famous work here in Hong Kong, a private lecture. So talk to me after.